Free and fair elections are the cornerstone of democracy. Without them, the whole thing falls apart. But recently, many have called into question whether American elections are instead rife with fraud, like the recent video from social media influencer Nick Shirley. Now, far be it from me to question Shirley's motives or intelligence, but as researchers who study voting and use the voter file, we felt we had to correct some inaccuracies. Right, Clayton?
You're absolutely right, Graham. Nick Shirley is a moron who doesn't know what he's talking about. Shirley makes a number of claims in his video. Unfortunately for him, just about every last one of them is either false or misleading.
There are honestly too many of these for us to address every single one.
But there are still a number of very obviously false claims that we want to take you through. At the risk of taking Nick Shirley too seriously, these claims are: there are many suspiciously old voters who are voting in California elections. Many people are registered to vote at illegal addresses. Turnout at some of these locations is suspiciously high. Though it's not stated directly, it's heavily insinuated that all of this is somehow exceptional or unique to California, and we're going to talk about this one throughout. People are voting in an impossible number of elections. There are lots of illegals voting in California elections, and then there are a lot of minor factual inaccuracies that we'll get to as we go along.
We're going to talk about each one of these claims, tell you why they're incorrect or misleading, and tell you what it actually shows, if it actually shows anything at all.
First, let's look at Shirley's claim that there is an absurd number of very old voters voting in California elections. This is wrong for two reasons, the first of which they admit themselves. Nick Shirley's data guy admits that it's just a simple data flaw.
There's people that show to be 125 years old in our voter rolls, and that's a simple data flaw.
What are we even doing here? Like, they admit in their own video that this is just an administrative record-keeping error. And then second, we know this because out of all of the voters that are listed as 125 or older in the voter file, 7,003 of them to be exact, 4,350 of them were born in 1900, and then 1,891 of them were born in 1850. Those would be kind of weird birth years to select if you were trying to do voter fraud.
It's important to remember that these errors are just a tiny fraction of California's overall voter population. These 7,003 people are just 0.0278% of California's over 25 million voters. Those over 100, surely there are some errors there too, but California is a very big state, and it's not unreasonable that there are centenarians. The estimated centenarian population is over 10,000.
And the voter named Virginia that Shirley visited, the man he spoke to said that she's 81. So she was born around 1945. Her record shows 1900, but she's clearly a real person. That's not fraud, that's just a missing birthday.
And crucially, California is not unusually bad at this. This is the share of registered voters aged 90 or older in every state, sorted from most Republican to most Democratic registration. California, gold bar, right here, ranks 35th out of 51. 34 states have a higher fraction of 90-plus voters than California. Hawaii is first at nearly 2%. New York, Maine, Connecticut, Florida, all higher than California. If Shirley's theory were correct, that old age anomalies signal fraud, the fraud would have to be concentrated in Hawaii and North Dakota, not California. And the party distribution of older voters is exactly what we would expect from older voters, given what we know about the fact that there's been a growth in independent registrations. So older voters are more likely to be either Democrat or Republican compared to younger generations who are more likely to register independent.
Then, last but not least, Shirley doesn't present any evidence that large numbers of these voters are actually voting, instead just relying on news clips from years ago. That's because the voters in the voter file that are actually dead aren't voting.
Researchers at Stanford estimated the prevalence of dead voters voting in 8 years of universal vote-by-mail elections and found a grand total of 14 potential cases of fraud out of more than 4.5 million votes cast. That's a total of 0.0003% of voters. Their upper bound, assuming every uncertain case is actually fraud, is 210 cases, still 0.005%. For context, the margin in the closest Senate race in the nation during this period was 350 votes. An upper bound of 210 doesn't move elections.
The Abutine case Shirley shows is almost certainly just an administrative spillover. A family member received her mail ballot and mistakenly returned it without realizing it wasn't theirs. This kind of thing happens. It's a small administrative error. California has signature verification on every mail ballot, which is specifically designed to catch this. It's not evidence of organized fraud. Shirley's second claim is that there are lots of voters who are registering at P.O. boxes. He found, apparently, 30 voters at one UPS location and called it fraud. First, a clarification on the law. In California, you do have to register with your domicile address, where you actually physically live. So, if people were registering at post office boxes, that would be illegal under state law. But that's not what's happening here. I took the time to look at every single voter in San Diego County, where Shirley filmed his video, that had a mailing address at a P.O. box. And near as I can tell, out of more than 10,000 of them, not a single one was actually registered with that P.O. box as their domicile address. It was only ever their mailing address. As for the voters supposedly registered at the UPS store, they're not registered there either. I went and looked at all of the UPS locations in San Diego until I found the UPS store that Shirley investigated. And the building that has the UPS store is a mixed-use building called Kensington Commons. And the UPS store is in Suite 103. None of the voters that Nick claims are registered in the store have Suite 103 as their apartment number in the voter file. Nick and his buddy were just either too lazy to match the suite number, too out of their depth to realize they needed to, or they're deliberately lying to you. And the same thing is true of the Joan B. Kroc Institute of Peace at the University of San Diego. It has a specific suite number on that address, and none of the students who are registered to vote at that address have that suite number as their registration in the voter file. I hope you're picking up on the theme here, but the exact same thing is true of the last post office that Shirley visits. There are a bunch of apartments in the same building, and none of the voters registered there actually are registered in the post office suite. He made the same exact mistake 3 times in a row.
And the 5 people who are registered at the self-storage facility, they are registered there and they shouldn't be. But 3 are registered Republican and 2 are registered no party preference. So it's not exactly Democratic fraud.
And as for those 5 voters, it was almost certainly illegal for Shirley to reveal their identities like that. And you know that he knows this because he blurs and mutes the names of voters later in the video, but just forgot to do it for the self-storage folks. And then he posted it for hundreds of millions of people to see on Twitter.
Moreover, this is also not a California-specific Democratic fraud-proving problem. Here's the share of registered voters with a P.O. box mailing address in every state. California ranks 30th, below average. California's rate is 3.5%.
And here's where it gets interesting. This scatterplot shows P.O. box rates against Democratic registration share for every state. The states with the most P.O. box registrations are Alaska, 31%, Wyoming, 23%, Montana, 20%, New Mexico, 18%. These are rural states. In rural America, home mail delivery often doesn't exist. People just use P.O. boxes instead. That's why the correlation actually runs negative. Republican-leaning states have more P.O. box registrations, not Democratic ones. If P.O. box registrations were a Democratic fraud operation, you'd expect the opposite pattern, and you don't get it.
Now, is address verification on voter rolls a serious issue? Yes, absolutely. And election administrators are working on it. But 30 people registered at a UPS store who aren't even actually registered there out of 25 million voters, that's not a massive fraud story. That's a small data issue that exists everywhere.
Well, but what about the insanely high rates of turnout at some of these locations? Surely that's suspicious, right? Well, not really. You see, the Pew Research Center estimates that 94.1% of registered voters, the people who Shirley actually sees in the voter file, cast ballots in any given election. So 41 out of 45 at a senior center, 91%, 106 out of 108 at a sorority, 98%. These are normal rates of voting for people who are actually registered to vote, because he and his friend don't understand the difference between eligible voter turnout and registered voter turnout.
This also applies to the claim that people are voting in an impossible number of elections. So he visits Doris, who was born in 1940. Let's assume that Doris registered when she was 21, the minimum age at the time to register, in 1961. Then Doris is eligible to vote in 1962, up through 2024. That's 2 elections each election year because of the primary and general that Doris could have voted in. So 64 elections Doris had the opportunity to vote in, and that's not even including special or municipal elections. So 51 out of 64 elections is nowhere outside the realm of possibility.
All of this makes Shirley's last claim, that there are somehow large numbers of undocumented immigrants voting in California elections, which was already completely unsubstantiated, seem even more ridiculous than it already was. He has no evidence whatsoever, and the proof, quote unquote, that he furnishes for his other claims that something untoward might be going on, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
Then last but certainly not least, as people who've had to apply for voter file access, some of Shirley's actions here struck us as suspect. So we asked a lawyer friend of ours to review the video.
And she said that Shirley probably violated the law in at least 4 ways while making this video. His contact said explicitly that they get their information directly from the Secretary of State. That means they had to fill out this form
with these listed prohibitions. That means that the aforementioned reading of people's names out loud in the video,
the fact that Shirley's whistleblower contact transferred the voter file to Nick Shirley, assuming he's not in fact a vendor, the fact that he's using this video partly as an advertisement for Polymarket,
and the fact that he actually went to voters' residences,
are all likely violations of California law.
What Nick Shirley is doing here is serious and dangerous. At the time of this recording, his video has been seen 500,000 times on YouTube and millions of times on other platforms. Few, if any, of those people will see this video demonstrating that he was wrong about all of it.
He's lying to the American public, whether intentionally or because he's simply too out of his depth to realize it, and he's hurting trust in American elections as a result.
And he's harassing voters at their homes,
violating California law in making this video filled with misinformation.
Free and fair elections are the cornerstone of democracy. Without them, the whole thing falls apart. In the most charitable read, Nick Shirley thinks he's contributing to free and fair elections. What he's actually doing is exactly the opposite.